Like me, if you were born in the 80s and raised in the 90s, there's a good chance your weekend football routine involved Channel 4, a pink newspaper, a bowl of cereal, and James Richardson sitting outside a Roman cafe with a ridiculously large gelato. Gazzetta Football Italia wasn't just a TV show, it was a ritual. It was pure 90s football nostalgia. It didn't matter whether it was Inter v Lazio at the San Siro or Brescia v Venezia in the rain, we were locked in. The stars were bigger, the kits were better, and the football just felt more glamorous. For a lot of us in the UK, it supplied us with one of few free-to-view football games on TV. And for many of us, this was our first real introduction to Italian football, and not to mention to so many players we'd end up idolizing. This video isn't all about the absolute megastars like Maldini or Del Piero, though yes, they're here too. It's a look back at that golden generation of 90s legends. The ones who, when you saw their faces pop up in the Gazzetta opening montage, you knew you were in for a good afternoon. So today on Retro Football Club, let's find out where some of those magic names are now, the iconic legends of Channel 4's finest football export. Angelo Peruti didn't look like a typical modern goalkeeper. Stocky, broad-shouldered, and never one for theatrics, but when it came to shot stopping, there were few better in the world during the 90s. He came through at Roma, but made his name at Juventus, becoming their number one just as the club was re-emerging as a European force. By the mid-90s, Peruzzi had won 3 league titles, a Champions League, and earned a reputation for being almost unbeatable in one-on-one situations. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable, calm, and always in control. For a generation of fans watching Gazzetta Football Italia, he was the reassuring presence in goal during Juve's campaigns, often seen barking orders behind defenders like Ferrara and Montero. After leaving Juve, he had a brief spell at Inter before joining Lazio, where he played over 200 games and added another Coppa Italia and Supercoppa to his collection. Internationally, he was part of Italy's squads for Euro 96 and the 1998 World Cup, but often found himself battling with Gianluca Pagliuca and later Gianluigi Buffon for the number 1 shirt. After hanging up his gloves in 2007, Peruzzi took the quiet route. No punditry gigs or headline chasing, just a quiet move into backroom roles. He became a goalkeeping coach for the national team, then later worked as Ciro Ferrara's assistant manager for the Italy under-21 team, before following him to a similar role with Sampdoria. He is now entirely retired from football and lives in the rural town of Piero, where in a recent interview stated that he barely watches any football these days. Pierluigi Casaragi was one of those strikers who maybe didn't get the fanfare of some of his Italian contemporaries, but he was always there, always in the conversation. He broke through at Monza and made his name at Juventus in the late 80s and early 90s, where he won the Coppa Italia and 2 UEFA Cups, playing in a team full of stars. But it was at Lazio where he really hit his stride. Casaragi had a rugged, physical style, good in the air, strong with his back to goal, and always seemed to pop up with important finishes. He earned 44 caps for Italy, scoring 13 times, and featured at Euro 96, where he found the net against Russia. In 1998 he made a big move to Chelsea, part of that early wave of Italian players arriving in the Premier League. But just 10 games into his time in England, a horrific cruciate ligament injury, in a clash with West Ham's Shaka Hislop, changed everything. Despite a staggering 10 operations, Casaragi never played again. He was only 29. After retirement he moved into coaching. He managed Legnano, before roles with Italy's under-21 and Olympic football sides. He later was seen often working alongside Gianfranco Zola, first with Cagliari and Al Arabi, and later had a stint as assistant manager at Birmingham City. Like the aforementioned Peruzzi, Casaragi has now retired entirely from football and has kept a relatively low profile since. Roberto Donadoni was never the loudest name in Italian football, but he was always one of the most important players during the 80s and 90s. A technically gifted, hard-running wide midfielder, Donadoni was the engine room of that all-conquering AC Milan side under Arrigo Sacchi, and later, Fabio Capello. While others grabbed the headlines, Donadoni just kept things ticking. Neat passes, endless running, and the kind of selflessness that made him a manager's dream. Between 1986 and 1999, across 2 spells at the club, he won 6 Serie A titles, 3 Champions Leagues, and became a fixture in one of the greatest club sides of all time. To fans watching from the UK, Donadoni felt like the grown-up in the team. Calm, reliable, and always involved. whether he was linking play down the right or floating in a dangerous cross. He also played 63 times for Italy and was one of the standout performers during the 1994 World Cup, where the Azzurri came agonizingly close to glory in the heat of Pasadena. After leaving Milan, he had a short stint in the US with the New York-New Jersey MetroStars, before retiring with Al Ittihad in 2000. Once he hung up his boots, Donadoni went straight into coaching. He managed both Lecce and Livorno twice, then moving to Genoa before in 2006 was given the biggest job in the country, replacing Marcello Lippi as manager of the Italian national team. It was a tough act to follow, and his spell ended after a disappointing Euro 2008, but he remained a respected figure, later taking over Napoli, Cagliari, Parma, Bologna, and Chinese side Shenzhen. He hasn't held a role since 2020, however he is still active in the world of Italian football. He occasionally appears on Italian TV and often gives interviews. Enrico Kza was never the flashiest forward in Serie A, but he had a knack for scoring goals that made you sit up and take notice. He could smash them in from 30 yards, nip in at the near post, or finish with cool precision on the counter. Starting out at Cremonese, he made his way up the Italian football ladder with hard graft and raw talent. By the mid-90s, he was leading the line for Sampdoria and later Parma, where he truly exploded into one of the league's most dangerous forwards. For Gazzetta Football Italia viewers, he was a regular in those Sunday highlights, usually scoring something outrageous. At Parma, he struck up a lethal partnership with Hernan Crespo, and was instrumental in their 1999 UEFA Cup win, scoring in the final against Marseille. He also played for Fiorentina, alongside Gabriele Batistuta, forming one of the most exciting forward duos in the league, before winding down his career with Lazio and Siena. On the international stage, he earned 17 caps for Italy, scoring 7 goals. He was part of the Euro 96 squad, although he never quite became a regular starter for Italy, but he was always in the conversation, always on the radar. After retiring, he briefly managed Figolini, but his time at the club ended when they were removed from the Italian league system in 2010. Since then, he has retired and has stepped away from the spotlight, but does often give interviews, certainly when discussing his son, Liverpool and Italy winger Federico Chiesa. Hernan Crespo was one of those strikers who always looked like he belonged on the big stage, tall, graceful and deadly in front of goal. He had that classic poacher's instinct, but with the elegance of a playmaker. For fans of Gazzetta Football Italia, he arrived like a bolt of lightning, a young Argentine at Parma who seemed to always find space where none existed. Whether it was a header, a toe poke, or a cool finish under pressure, Crespo made goals look inevitable. He joined Parma in 1996 after tearing it up at River Plate, and within a couple of seasons, he was one of the most feared forwards in Europe. He helped Parma win the Coppa Italia and UEFA Cup in 1999, forming one of Serie A's most exciting attacks alongside Enrico Kza. That same summer, Lazio broke the world transfer record to sign him, and Crespo responded with 26 league goals in his first season, finishing as capocannoniere, the league's top scorer. His career after that was a bit of a whirlwind. He moved to the Premier League with Chelsea, where despite showing flashes of brilliance, his time at Stamford Bridge was seen as a failure, and he was loaned out to both AC Milan and Inter before signing for the latter permanently in 2008. He won 3 league titles with Inter later in his career and went on to play for Genoa before returning to Parma, where he retired in 2012. Internationally, he earned 64 caps and scored 35 goals for Argentina, including strikes at both the 1998, 2002, and 2006 World Cups. He was always in the mix, always one of the first names Argentina turned to when they needed a goal. After hanging up his boots, Crespo went into coaching, starting small, working his way up. He managed Parma's Primavera team, before roles with Modena and Banfield in Argentina, then made headlines by leading Defensa y Justicia to their first ever continental title, winning the Copa Sudamericana in 2020. He's since coached at Sao Paulo and in Qatar, and was last in a role in 2024 at Al Ain in the United Arab Emirates. Gabriele Batistuta was everything you wanted in a number 9. Raw power, explosive finishing, and a presence that defenders couldn't ignore, even if they tried. For fans of Gazzetta Football Italia, he was essential viewing. The long hair, the thunderous shots, the iconic celebrations. Batistuta wasn't just scoring goals, he was creating moments. Moments you'd talk about at school on Monday. Moments you'd try to recreate in the park, usually without success. He arrived in Italy in 1991 and chose Fiorentina, a club not quite among the elite, but with a passionate following. He scored goals from the first whistle and became a cult hero. Even when Fiorentina were relegated in 1993, Batistuta stayed loyal. He helped them win promotion the next season, and then went on a goal-scoring rampage in Serie A, regularly finishing among the league's top scorers and earning the nickname Batigol. For years, he was one of the most feared strikers in Europe, but silverware continued to elude him, until he made the switch to Roma in 2000. That move paid off instantly. Batistuta scored 20 goals in his first season, leading the line as Roma won the Scudetto for the first time since 1983. It was the crowning moment of a glittering career, and even though he was into his 30s, he still played with the intensity and hunger of a man trying to prove something. For Argentina, he was just as deadly. 3 World Cups, 54 international goals, including hat-tricks at both the 1994 and 1998 tournaments. At one point, he was Argentina's all-time top scorer, and for many fans, still the most complete striker they've ever had. After retiring in 2005, Batistuta went through a tough period. Years of playing through pain had taken their toll, and he's been honest about how badly his body broke down after football. At one stage, he said he was in so much pain he asked doctors if they could amputate his legs. Thankfully, surgery and rehabilitation helped, and in true Batistuta fashion, he didn't slow down for long. He even took up polo, playing competitively in Argentina, and bringing the same intensity to the saddle that he once brought to Serie A. He lives a quieter life now, mostly out of the spotlight. But for anyone who grew up on Channel 4's coverage of Italian football, Batistuta was the gold standard. Ruthless, iconic, and unforgettable, a true legend of the Gazzetta era. Alessandro Del Piero was the kind of player who made you stop what you were doing, whether it was a flick, a feint, or one of those trademark curlers into the far corner. He had a style that felt effortless, elegant, even when the stakes were high. He was one of the defining faces of the era. Capable of playing as an attacking midfielder or as a second striker, when he first broke into the Juventus first team in the early 90s, he already looked like a star. Slight frame, floppy hair, socks down, but with a technique and intelligence that set him apart. He became the jewel in a Juventus side packed with talent, league titles, Champions League finals, the lot. And while he missed a chunk of time with a serious knee injury in 1998, Del Piero came back, maybe even more complete than before. He was never the quickest, never the most physical, but he didn't need to be. He had the ability to cut in from the left and curl it into the top corner, and everyone in the stadium knew it was coming. They just couldn't stop it. He spent nearly 20 years at Juventus, scoring over 200 goals and becoming the club's all-time leading scorer. But what made him different was his loyalty. When Juventus were relegated after the Calciopoli scandal, he stayed, in the second division, as club captain. That kind of move turned him from legend to icon in the eyes of the fans. Internationally, he had his ups and downs, sometimes overshadowed by other stars, but still racked up 91 caps for Italy, and was part of the squad that lifted the 2006 World Cup. He came off the bench to score a vital goal in the semi-final against Germany, and finally got his hands on the one trophy that had eluded him. After leaving Juve in 2012, he had a short but enjoyable spell in Australia with Sydney FC, then a final cameo in India with Delhi Dynamos. Since retiring, he's settled in Los Angeles, running a football academy, and opening a high-end Italian restaurant. He does punditry work now, mostly for CBS and Sky, and still speaks with that same grace he played with. Paolo Maldini was the definition of class. Whether he was playing left-back or centre-half, wearing the armband or not, he carried himself with a calm authority that made him feel untouchable. He didn't dive into tackles, he read the game 2 steps ahead. He didn't shout, he led by example. Maldini was ever present. Week in, week out, there he was, gliding across the San Siro pitch, perfectly timed interceptions, never flustered, always in control. He made his debut for AC Milan in 1985, as a teenager, and didn't retire until 2009. That's 25 years at one club. Over 900 appearances, 7 league titles, 5 Champions League finals, and all of it in that same red and black shirt. He played through multiple eras, Baresi, Rijkaard, Van Basten, then into the Shevchenko and Kaka years. And somehow always remained central. Coaches came and went, teams were rebuilt, but Maldini was the constant. Internationally, he earned 126 caps for Italy, as well as captaining the side, and playing in 4 World Cups and 3 European Championships. But the major international trophy always eluded him. He came closest in 1994 and again in 2000, losing both finals in heartbreaking fashion. Still, nobody questioned his greatness. He was universally respected by teammates, rivals, managers, and fans alike. After retiring, Maldini took a long break from football. He could have had any job in the game, but he stayed away. He focused on his family, his business ventures, and, in true Maldini fashion, casually became a professional tennis player and entered a tournament in 2017. He played doubles on the ATP Challenger Tour in Milan. However, they lost in the first round, but of course he carried himself with the same quiet professionalism he had in football. In 2018, he returned to AC Milan in a director role, helping to rebuild the club from behind the scenes. Under his guidance, Milan returned to the Champions League and won the Scudetto in 2022, their first in over a decade. He left in 2023 after a shake-up at boardroom level, but the fans never turned on him. Roberto Baggio wasn't just a footballer, he was a feeling. There was a kind of magic to the way he played, a grace that set him apart, even in an era filled with all-time greats. The touch, the vision, the free kicks bent into the top corner like he was placing the ball there by hand, Baggio was an artist. For Gazzetta Football Italia fans, he was the main event. You didn't just watch Baggio, you followed him wherever he went. He started at Vicenza, then lit up Serie A with Fiorentina, where he became a cult hero. When he moved to Juventus in 1990, it caused riots in Florence. That's how much he meant to people. At Juve, he hit world-class levels, winning the UEFA Cup and the Ballon d'Or in 1993, and carrying Italy all the way to the World Cup final a year later. Even the infamous penalty miss in the '94 final couldn't erase what he did at that tournament. If anything, it added to the legend, the idea of Baggio as this poetic, tragic genius who carried too much on his shoulders. He went on to play for Milan, Bologna, Inter, and finally Brescia, and no matter the shirt, he made things happen. He'd drift past 2 defenders, pick out a pass nobody else saw, or drop a shoulder and send the keeper the wrong way. Even as his knees began to fail him, the mind was always 2 steps ahead. He played until 2004 and bowed out with a standing ovation at the San Siro, both sets of fans rising for one of the most beloved figures Italian football has ever seen. After retirement, Baggio worked for the Italian Football Federation and achieved his coaching badges, however never joined a professional club. These days he lives quietly in the countryside, immersed in nature, and has converted to Buddhism, completely content away from the game's chaos. He's popped up here and there, ambassador roles, tributes, awards, but he's kept his distance. And that almost adds to the legend. Gianfranco Zola was the kind of player who made you smile. Not because he was flashy or arrogant, far from it, but because everything he did on a football pitch had a touch of genius to it. He was never the biggest, or the fastest, or the strongest, but he was probably the most imaginative. He had a way of making the difficult look simple, and the simple look beautiful. And for fans of Gazzetta Football Italia, Zola was one of those players you looked forward to every weekend. A little magician, in a Parma shirt, floating between the lines and curling free kicks into the top corner like it was second nature. He started at Napoli, learning from none other than Maradona, who called him his natural heir. When Diego left, Zola took on the creative mantle, and when he moved to Parma in the mid-90s, his talent exploded. That team was full of flair, like Faustino Asprilla, Thomas Brolin, and Dino Baggio. And Zola was at the heart of it, setting up goals, scoring screamers, and putting defenders on skates. But in 1996, in a move that raised a few eyebrows at the time, he left Serie A to join Chelsea. And that's when the rest of the world really took notice. He arrived in the Premier League before it became the juggernaut it is today, and within a few months, he was turning defenders inside out and scoring outrageous goals with that trademark cheeky grin. He won the Football Writers' Player of the Year in his very first season, despite arriving in November, and quickly became a cult hero at Stamford Bridge. He helped Chelsea win 2 FA Cups, the League Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup, and left in 2003 with fans begging him to stay. He finished his career at Cagliari, helping them win promotion, and then retired. After that, he went into management with mixed results. Stints at West Ham, Watford, Birmingham City, and a return to Chelsea as assistant manager under Maurizio Sarri, where he added another Europa League medal to his collection. These days, he pops up on TV now and then, always with the same quiet charm and humility that made him so loved as a player. For those of us raised on 90s Italian football, Zola was the kind of player who reminded you what football could be: joyful, clever, and completely unpredictable. A footballer in the truest, purest sense. And finally, moving on to our host. For those of us who grew up watching Gazzetta Football Italia, James Richardson wasn't just the host, he was the gateway. Sitting at a cafe table with a coffee, cake, or gelato holding a copy of the Gazzetta dello Sport, he brought Serie A into our living rooms with calm charm and a bit of cheeky wit. He made tactical talk entertaining, turned pink newspaper headlines into punchlines, and made Reggiana v Salernitana feel like a must-watch. But Richardson didn't disappear when Gazzetta came to an end. He quietly reinvented himself as one of the most respected and versatile presenters in continental football media. He hosted The Guardian's Football Weekly podcast for over a decade, becoming a pioneer in football podcasting before launching the Totally Football Show in 2017. That show became a hit in its own right, sharp, funny, insightful, and was eventually picked up by The Athletic. He's also stayed active on TV, fronting European football coverage for BT Sport, presenting the UEFA Champions League Goals Show, and even branching out into the Fantasy Premier League show for Premier League Productions. And just to keep things eclectic, he's also presented World's Strongest Man and the Great Model Railway Challenge. In 2020, he did something that delighted long-time fans. He digitized and uploaded old Gazzetta episodes to his YouTube channel, Jimbo Vision. It was like finding a box of your old football stickers in the attic, perfectly preserved. Richardson remains a class act, multilingual, understated, and still one of the sharpest voices in the game. And for those of us who came of age watching Channel 4 on Saturday mornings, he'll always be the guy who made Italian football feel like the coolest club you were lucky enough to join. That's it for now. Do you want to see a second video? If you do, who do you want us to feature next time? Thanks for watching. If you like retro football, please consider giving us a like and subscribing to the channel. We've got goals, stories, and plenty of nostalgia. We've been Retro Football Club. See you next time.